So welcome again to our inner compass. And these workshops we're holding once a month are based on the cornerstone aspects of Raja Yoga. And so we really find it so useful to take different aspects that we're all pretty familiar with in day-to-day life, or we've seen examples. And how do I discover the significance of that so it becomes very relevant on a deeper level, a level that's much more meaningful to each of us, that's relevant. And so today's session is about our inner compass. So throughout the session, we'll have some questions just for you to reflect on, and you're welcome to share in the chat box. You're again welcome to unmute yourself if you, whatever you're comfortable with. And again, it's about being able to provoke thought within yourself. So in terms of a compass, do you know what a compass is? What is a physical compass? What do we use it for? Maybe we don't necessarily use it, maybe not the traditional kind, but we actually do have different forms of compasses that we use in the day. So what do we use compasses for? And if you don't know what a compass is, please let us know, to show us directions. Yes, to give us directions, definitely. Has anyone ever had to use a compass before, like the traditional kind? I'll ask in a second what other kinds of compasses we use. Yes. So were you using it in camping, Jima? I don't know if you were camping when you were in India. They also have compasses that you can also stick in your car as well. I don't know how accurate those are. Okay. So, I was looking up about compasses, and I did study physics when I was younger, so I knew a little bit about it. So Pauline said, an instrument used in sailing your ship. Yes, definitely. So when I looked up about compasses, they depend on actually the Earth's core. The Earth's core is actually the way that's the energy in it, because it actually spins the core inside. It creates this magnetic field, and it uses, so the compass in itself is probably like a mini magnet, and it aligns to the magnetic field because the magnetic field is basically a direction. It moves in a certain direction on the Earth. So basically you're relying on this compass to be able to line up to the magnetic direction of the Earth, so that it'll be able to point in a certain direction. The intention of a compass, if you all have seen a map, so that in a way, if you've seen a map, you should have, any of you seen it? There's usually a north, south, east, west on there as well. That's kind of like a compass on there, kind of telling you which direction, so that when you're on the street, you're looking, okay, I'm trying to go to, I don't know, I'm trying to go to the Calgary Tower. Now I know, looking at the map, where am I facing? And for those who are using Google Maps or GPS, that's kind of like a compass as well. So we have very modern day forms of compasses, but being able to give us direction. Now, what's so important about giving us directions? Why is that important? Purpose in life, inner self. Now we're jumping into deeper things. Yes, so we don't get lost. We don't want to be lost. Gives us an idea of where we're going. So Zoe mentioned something on a deeper level, which we will definitely get to, but just in the general sense, for a physical compass, gives us an idea where we're going so we don't get lost. And so that's really important to know this, to know what exactly is a compass for. And so, do you know on a physical level what can affect a compass's accuracy? Or maybe even just, hypothetically, what can affect a compass's accuracy? Needle isn't functioning properly. Yes, the magnetic field. And I was looking up, Nilu, about the magnetic field, that there's something called the true north, which is if you were to look at a globe of the earth, which is the very top is the North Pole. So wherever you're situated in the world, if you have a compass, ideally it's supposed to point to the tip, the North Pole. But again, it was just interesting on a spiritual level too, that the magnetic core of the earth is actually changing. And so the magnetic field is actually not pointing at the same direction as the true north. So compasses are not exactly particularly accurate. It cycles through time and it changes, but that's quite interesting and very relevant to what today's topic is about as well. And so definitely there's things that can function that affect it. And we'll talk about that more on a spiritual level too. So now when we're talking about spirituality, what is our inner compass? What do you think that means? Maybe what it feels like. Our truth. Mm-hmm. Knowing who I am, our balance. Very good. Yes. Beautiful. A sense of purpose. Excellent. Mm-hmm. Where I am heading. Absolutely. And I know that Zoe had mentioned earlier as well, in terms of purpose in life and inner self. So now it's interesting. Earlier, it was mentioned that it was on a physical level, uh, not to get lost and reach the right destination. And so, what do you think on a spiritual level? What do you think destination is? Because if you've noticed, especially with your own explorations, everything is not physical every time we talk about things on that parallel. So we know physical destination. What do you think destination might mean on a spiritual level? It might be a deep one, it might be a tricky one. So there were inner harmony, knowing my true self, feeling of peace. Excellent. Now, I would invite you, if you have notebook and pen, you're welcome to go. Again, this is just for yourself. Always check in with myself. What is my destination? And this will be actually a very relevant practical part of what you're going to do in terms of experimenting for yourself on a day-to-day level, in terms of being really clear with myself. What is a spiritual destination? These are excellent things that have been shared. Feeling at peace, inner harmony, knowing my true self, an idea about why we come to this world. So that's connected to sense of purpose as well. And so I would invite you to think about that. And you will notice that when we're going to talk about destination, that there can sometimes be obstacles, just as we're talking about a physical compass. There can sometimes be certain things can affect its capacity to point in the right direction, and maybe to be able to follow whatever the direction that we're trying to head towards. So why do you think it's important? We talked about why is a compass important, a physical compass. So we talked about what would that spiritual destination be? What does a spiritual destination look like? Why is that important? Why does being clear about, a meaningful destination, why is that important? For self-realization, to find peace and happiness. Absolutely. Now, these things are, it's kind of like the objective, just if you're playing a board game, there is a purpose of the board game is to win, right? But being very clear within myself, what destiny, why is it important to my destination to become soul conscious? So that's a great point, Pauline. Maybe we'll keep that in terms of why. Why is soul consciousness important? So we'll touch on that too. Not to get lost in losing myself in external influences, definitely. So let's make some connections together. What do you think that when I am influenced, what is the relationship between being influenced, external, maybe internal, inside my mind, and seeking for peace and happiness, sense of purpose, inner harmony? What do you think the relationship is? Is there a relationship between being influenced and trying to attain peace, inner harmony, happiness? Is there a relationship? It feels like a struggle at times. So many distractions, external versus internal, perishable versus imperishable. Aren't those aren't our core values when we're externally influenced? I think that's what you mean by Nilu. Yes, when we are influenced by external things, we are not clear about my sense of purpose. It feels like resistance. Now we really hope that in the near future, we will actually have a workshop about consistency, because that aspect of resistance really came up. Actually, all these things, these kinds of forms of obstacles. And so this is such an important topic, because we actually need to be able to learn how to sharpen my inner compass, how to strengthen my inner compass. And for those who have taken the Raja Yoga course, compass actually refers to the intellect. So there is this capacity within me, even though however I am in terms of how I feel, my awareness of myself, there is this capacity that I have to be able to discern what is right, what is wrong. I know those are very strong words, so let's use clearer words. What is going to honor the real me, and what is going to dishonor the real me? So that's basically what this intellect is, this capacity to discern what is going to basically help me get back to myself again. And so I know we talked about on a physical level, again, there is things that can affect the accuracy of a physical compass. And when it comes to this aspect about this capacity to know what is real with respect, again, to the true me. And I know it was mentioned, my truth in terms of, there is actually a true me. There is an absolute truth of who I am. Now, this topic of truth is such a sensitive topic, I would say, because, there's, and I'm certainly not here to argue with anyone, but it's more about provoking thought. What is truth? Like, do you think that there is such a thing as absolute truth? Now, before you actually answer that question, I'll give you a couple of examples that would it be very helpful, even on just a worldly sort of example, would it be so helpful if there are common standards so that everyone's on the right page? For example, a red light means to stop, a green light means to go. Would that be very helpful when you have, those signs that tell you you're going towards downtown, towards the Calgary Tower, you're going outside of Calgary? Another example is actually true north, is that true north is defined that it's a fixed point on the globe, right on the North Pole, that is what you call absolute north. So now thinking about those things, about what is absolute, now do you believe there's such a thing as absolute truth? That there is an absolute truth of actually who I really am? So just something for you to reflect on. You can certainly share your thoughts in the chat box if you'd like. So Jima shared, yes, I do believe about that aspect based on knowledge I have received and experienced. And so one of the most important things is that see for yourself is often a phrase that's used in the study, spiritual knowledge. See for yourself when you're experimenting with the aspects of Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga, is really about the study of the true worth of who you are, this gaining back the mastery of who you are. That's really what this is about. And so that's a question that, again, I will leave with you in terms, is there an absolute truth? Is there an absolute identity to who I am? Because if you think about through the day, we actually wear a lot of different hats. We have different roles. And sometimes without us realizing it, we can be different with different people and different in different roles. And sometimes if you are actually quite honest with yourself, sometimes we are perhaps maybe pleasing certain individuals or afraid when we're around certain individuals. And so we're not really ourselves. And so even our judgment and how we express and how we think and how we feel isn't consistent in all sorts of situations. And that actually reveals about this thing that we are actually affected by external influences. And ultimately, those external influences are resulting in inner influences, noise within my mind. And that's going to definitely affect what has been shared earlier about what is this destination we're looking for? Looking for inner peace, harmony, happiness. So Pauline shares, I do believe in God and his perfect creation, and that includes about our absolute truth. So very thought-provoking question for each of you. So thank you, Pauline. So some other reflective questions, really important. Again, these questions, I would invite you to note them down because it's about, again, what I can actually do to strengthen my inner compass. So what do you think actually dulls your compass, desensitizes your compass? So it's not working very well. What kinds of things can create interference? Emotions, absolutely. And while others are typing in the chat box, Sheila, I invite you to ask what kinds of emotions and what causes these emotions to emerge, because it's a part of this question about what is what is the interference, what is causing this interference. So Jima has mentioned vices, and I will type in the chat box what these vices are. If you haven't taken the Raja Yoga course, we're specifically mentioning about things that are not us, but have become nearly basically as if they're integrated in our sense of self through time, because we've lost ourselves. So Zoe has mentioned what kinds of interference, different social roles we have to perform. Definitely, absolutely, be a mother, a wife, a sister. Fights and decisions we have to take under pressure. Absolutely. And it's the feeling actually of being under pressure that is creating the interference. And one time I was listening to a facilitator mention about external pressures, and ultimately the external, what we perceive as external pressure, is affecting this pressure we're experiencing inside. So Polly has mentioned physical discomforts like ailments, injuries, exhaustion, absolutely, especially in the profession you're in. And we can't discount that there is physical discomfort as well. Absolutely. Any other thoughts? And I just wanted to elaborate something about what Zoe had mentioned about these different roles. Because when you're in different roles, you also have different priorities. And those priorities can compete with one another. You could have a certain standard of some call it ethics, in certain professional fields, a certain standard. But sometimes when there's certain pressures, it can also start to challenge even your own inner standard of what is right. And you see that a lot in social roles. It could be even in the workplace. It could even be in these roles that Zoe had mentioned about where you're making choices, or your priorities can sometimes even affect how you treat others, how we treat each other, how we see others. And I've made it such a clear point for myself when I have to step into, the workplace I am in. It's so easy. The moment you see someone, you just see their role. It's so easy. The first thing you want to say to them has something to do with their role. That's like your first point of contact and the first point of communication. And I've been very cognizant about that. And I usually take a bit of time before, when I step into the workplace, to sort of just reground myself, where I am, who am I, so that I don't get pulled into those roles, because we can really be quite not ourselves, I suppose you can say, in interacting. So Zoe has mentioned, yes, that is right. And it's huge. I mean, the other day I just parked and I saw two souls, who work in the same place I am. The moment I saw them, I could feel inside the wave of that professional role that I am in. And it's quite interesting. We'll connect about that today, that it must have been because my compass is more refined to detect that feeling come through. And so this is a part of actually, how do I actually refine and sharpen my sensitivity of what is the absolute truth, and actually a sensitivity to actually increase that experience of the absolute truth of who I am. So we talked about things that are actually creating interference, and there's a lot of things that can fall into that category, and maybe we'll mention a little bit about that a little bit later. So what do you think can sharpen your inner compass? This sensitivity of what is the absolute truth. What do you think can sharpen that, strengthen that, make it more sensitive? And we're not talking about like being sensitive, like easily affected, easily insulted, but it's more sensitive to what is going to honor me and what's going to dishonor me. Silence, meditation, balance, diet, physical exercise, inner reflection, consistency of spiritual practice. Very good, excellent answers. And I wanted to just point out about the whole thing with balanced diet and physical exercise, that the physical well-being really still affects, our inner compass. And we won't be able to go into too much depth because, with the time that we have, but we are spiritual beings in a physical context. But because we have to acknowledge we've become completely enmeshed into physical context, we're very affected by physicality. And so I have to be cognizant of physical things that affect me too. And diet's a huge one. And this might be a sensitive thing for some who might be watching, but we are affected by vibration. So even vibration of food can really affect us too. So in this study, and it's if you are interested in going deeper into the experience of the absolute truth of who you are, then being mindful of what I'm eating. And in this study, we do invite souls to actually consider even experimenting with food that's prepared in a certain consciousness. And then we don't even use the word vegetarian. We actually use a peaceful diet. What kind of choices of food actually has a peaceful vibration? And so some mention about the vegetarian piece, and that's one part of it, actually. It's much more than just a vegetarian choice. It's what the vibration is in that, even up to how I am shopping for food as well. So just getting back to what souls had actually shared here, consistency of spiritual practice. We'll mention about that today. Great time with nature. That's an interesting one. And we'll go back to that. Introversion, self-reflection, experiencing silence. Yes, actions that will honor myself. And that's an excellent one. And we'll mention about that too. That also strengthens your inner compass. Use your inner compass, use your intellect, use that capacity to discern, check in times in the day. And you might even have to be very deliberate. And I've actually had that in my own little chart, just watching myself is, using it. Okay, now I just want to just check, does that feel like it's the right thing right now or not? Is this the right time or not? So the more you use it actually in day-to-day situations as well, you're strengthening that capacity too. So Sheila, I will mention about the whole thing with time and nature, because that's a spiritually significant thing as well. So in terms of, so these are excellent things, and I think you probably touched on all the points that we were going to talk about here. And so one of the things is really about, first step is asking yourself really honest questions. One of the two big questions, or three big questions, but we'll touch on the first two first, is who am I? Who am I really? And sometimes we find we ask ourselves those questions when it comes to, just times where there's a lot of stress, and perhaps maybe, just checking in with that a bit more frequently. And sometimes individuals are specifically asking themselves that question when it's only when it has like really difficult things going on in their life. And that's, I would say, is oftentimes the case. But there's something, I believe it was, that Pauline had mentioned about in terms of consistency of spiritual practice that would be really important to ask yourself that question as well, on a more frequent basis and on a more relevant basis in terms of your day-to-day, just your day-to-day activities. Because it's really easy to lose the destination through the day. Would you say that's the case? Because I do believe in our hearts, we know what matters to us is inner peace, is happiness, but we can sort of lose access to feeling that, lose access to feeling it is a priority at certain times. And so asking myself, honest questions, who am I? And so we'll just have a little bit of a reflection right now. And part of that honest question, a part of it too, is what is really going to fulfill me? So I'll invite you to have, we're just going to have a little bit of a reflection. One can see the image that's in front of me. And the whole point of the image is just to support this inner environment of focus, of calm, reflection, and solitude. That's all the image is, just to support that quietness inside. And let me just reflect on a role that I need to play in the day, a role that I find quite challenging for myself. It could be a role in a workplace. It could be a role that has to do with relationships, which has been mentioned, being someone's mother, or sister, or someone's friend. I just want you to reflect for a moment about that role. And thinking about what is it that makes it very challenging. What kind of pressures am I feeling? So I can always think about an actual situation. I would say that's the most useful because it's personally relevant to you. What is it that I find that is challenging for me being in that role? So putting myself in that scenario. What kind of feelings do I feel? Those are the big signs of interference. What kinds of feelings? What are the pace of my thoughts? And how fast do I feel I need to make decisions in those scenarios? I can start to see a few things in this reflection. I can start to see certain indicators of interference. And one of the biggest players of interference is actually the consciousness of the role itself. That's the biggest interference. Everything else that comes because of that. So I have a professional role to play, and there's certain priorities and expectations to fulfill that role. Perhaps it's a role in a relationship, and there's certain expectations and priorities of how I'm supposed to be. So that's the biggest interference. So keeping a note for yourself of that, to actually, in the next time you're there, be cognizant of that first interference. It's the awareness of that role. And sometimes I won't be able to catch that. I'll see other things. So some of the other ones that come after, racing of thoughts, maybe heaviness, certain emotions, could be frustration, anger, stress. Perhaps even the types of thoughts I have. Lots of thoughts that have to do with what I need to do. So these are other types of interference. And even being aware of others and their roles and their projects and their roles and responsibilities. And it might not seem like they're interference until I start to feel the heaviness. And there's other kinds of interference when things get a bit more heavy, tiredness, a sense of loss of purpose, burnout. And yes, one can feel burnout in all sorts of situations, not just the workplace. So just being able to be aware of that. So now knowing that, just ask myself the question, am I comfortable with keeping that kind of path, keeping that kind of trajectory? That this is what I want to continue to happen every time I go into that situation. Am I interested in changing that? Changing that on a deeper level, not just to manage that place I'm in, that situation I'm in, but to be able to go into the absolute truth of who I am. Am I interested in that, given how tiring it is? Being in that same situation, the same patterns, the same emotions, the same responses that come from within me, feeling powerless again and again. Am I interested in responding differently? Now, this is a real key piece in terms of an honest conversation. Reason why, it's about asking myself, am I getting tired of doing the same thing again and again? And it's not bringing me any fulfillment. And let that answer, am I interested? Now, it's okay if, that feeling isn't there right now, but this is a part of your reflection you want to touch again and again. Do I really feel interested in being able to have a different understanding and awareness of myself? Am I that tired of that same kind of pattern in those situations? And I want that feeling that comes within when it's a yes to really, you will personally feel it, how real it is to you. Yes, I want to do something different. And you want to sort of have this honest conversation like this quite frequently. Why is it does sharpen your compass, sharpens your intellect, gives strength to you to be able to choose something different. We call it the power of determination. So now just reflecting on that question, then who am I really? Am I these different roles that I play in the day? Am I just what others perceive me as, or how I perceive myself in those situations? Because I can feel very restricted and limited and stunted. Or is there more to me? So just honestly ask myself, do I feel there's more to me than just those roles I play in the day? And what honest answer comes up inside? Underneath the image that I see in the mirror that others see, underneath those roles, all the doingness, all of the successes and failures, underneath all those projects and tasks, there is me, this living being. Just that feeling, that pull to want that feeling of freedom, that feeling of lightness, that feeling of ease. Everyone wants that. It is a clear indicator that in my heart, I know there is much more to me. And just me sitting here right now, just inviting myself to keep the eyes open if possible. And just being aware of myself that I'm thinking right now, that I am very much aware, conscious. Being very cognizant of just me being very aware, conscious, thinking, reflecting. And aware now that me, this thinking, conscious, reflecting being, that's who I am. I sit inside this body, but I function as awareness. So I've always existed, I've always been this being. But now I'm just cognizant of what I really am, how I really function. For a long time, I think I am the body. My attention is on the hands, the feet, the body, the heart, the muscles, on what I see in the mirror, what is measurable and visible and tangible. But my attention has been actually only on the outside. And now bringing my awareness to me, the thinker, the conscious being. It's a very different sense of awareness because we're so used to something very physical. And yet at the same time, we know what we really want is peace, is happiness. We know we really want harmony, freedom. We want kindness. None of these things can be seen, just like me, the being. I'm just taking some time just to be, and just trusting that just to be, I'm feeling myself. I am a living being. That's why I feel so empty. Because I stopped experiencing me. I am this living being of calm. Cool and stable. This living presence is me. I am a soul. Existing inside this body. Nothing of physicality defines me. Sometimes it's hard to come into words of what I'm like, what I feel like, because that feeling is beyond words. And so we had shared about these honest questions, and a part of sharpening, this is part of what we're talking about now, is what is sharpening my compass, strengthening my compass. I'm just going to bring up our chat box again. Just taking some time to nurture this awareness of who I am. And lately, that feeling of being a living being has been so rich for me. And just trusting to just take some time to just fill up and engulf myself in that experience. It's been such a rich feeling. And one of the thoughts that came up for myself was that if that awareness of myself is pure, which is basically one and the same as true, then there will be natural silence. And what silence means that there's just not that noise inside your mind, the heaviness of emotions. There's nothing wrong with doing. It's just that what is driving our doingness is the issue. We're constantly trying to finish one thing or another thing so that we can cross it off the list, so that I can feel like, okay, I have less things so that I can feel light. And when we make choices like that, it actually only brings us farther away from ourselves. So a part of, we can start to create a list. Again, this is meant to be practical. What sharpens and strengthens my compass is that honest question, those honest questions, reflect on them. Let's say, it's mentioned about, consistency. Check in again and again about, who am I? And often why we use this aspect about just being tired of the way we operate. If you've been listening to some of the interview with the Raja Yogi sessions, we've been sharing about the power of disinterest, how powerful that is, because it goes hand in hand with actually a deep interest in the real me, a deep interest in exploring the absolute truth of who I am. But it needs to be coupled with disinterest, because we have some really, really strong addictions, deep routine ideas, thoughts, and habits that come up. So having to be very clear of what I am really, really tired of. And that really actually helps because it fuels this determination. Determination isn't, a violent thing. It's just this deep, deep clarity inside of what really matters. And actually, it's a feeling and it's a capacity that when something really matters, your focus is very clear. It's easy to not be distracted. So it's not about forcing things, but it's actually, what am I going to fuel inside so I can make decisions properly? So another honest question to ask myself is what I am not. So, which has been a part of reflecting on scenes and scenarios where you do really feel that you are not yourself. So what is it? What am I not? And a part of the reason why we have to ask ourselves that question, if you recall from the chat when Chima had mentioned about vices, we mentioned about ego, actually. And ego basically is this false persona of myself that's just continuing to protect a not real me. And it's not necessarily only protecting, it's actually just propagating, a false sense of who I am. So whether it is arrogance in terms of I am better than others or I'm less than others, feeling shy or feeling, just a false sense of self that's not real value, it's all within that same category. And some of the things that ego does is also that rationalization. Oh, I am really clear about myself. I don't need to check in about that. And one of the signs that we aren't is because we can't seem to keep a consistency in our spiritual practice, consistency in terms of being able to honor ourselves. And so another thing in terms of, before we move on to the next aspect, another honest question is even checking in with yourself. Okay, let's say I do that, and then what? Let's say I go and do something that dishonors myself, and having just a sort of play in your mind, and then what? And then where is that going to take me? Right? So that's another useful question. So something that was mentioned earlier, and would like to just focus a little bit about that. When it comes to internal interference, what do you think it means when it comes to food for the mind versus physical food? What do you think can cause interference? What kinds of food for the mind causes interference, and what kind of food for the mind actually supports the compass within? Doubt. Yeah, doubt is a huge one when it comes to interference. Huge one. Being jealous, anger, resentment, negative thoughts, lack of self-confidence, fear, 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 peers. Neela, could you elaborate on that in terms of peers? But about, what Zoe had mentioned about, sometimes we could use those actually as indicators, just as we did in a reflection. It's more indication that, I'm in a certain space internally now. I need to get back into another space so that I can be able to not have those feelings. But a big piece of it actually is to be able to watch this stuff inside. We call it detached observer, watching inside all these thoughts and feelings, and actually learn to do that on a daily basis, on throughout the day, on a regular basis. That also strengthens and sharpens our compass, because we are so easily affected, and I want to be able to start to see things versus being pulled by these things. So I want to be able to learn to start to look at that. And so Pauline shares self-sabotage. Absolutely. I think Nilo is trying to clarify people you interact with and share your thoughts and feelings. Definitely. It's interesting you're sharing about this in terms of interference, because right now, if individuals are aware that, on the world stage, it's actually very, very heavy. And honestly, no one is really particularly trying to, create this atmosphere that's heavy, but many, many are in a very, very heavy place. And that is creating an atmosphere that can be quite heavy. And so how do I protect myself? I mean, it's more than just protecting myself, actually. How do I become something more? How can I actually be of benefit to others? This morning's class was really powerful about, really take care of yourself. Learn to practice to feel the realness of who you are. And you will be able to have this capacity to actually go beyond this heaviness that's in the atmosphere, that it's actually all over the place now. And probably souls can really feel it within their workplaces, within their personal situations. And so Pauline's mentioned in terms of what helps, in terms of food for the mind, what helps and strengthens and protects our compass. Highly elevated thoughts sharpen our compass. Interference, that kind of food that's not helpful, desire of name and fame, expectations of appreciation, self-critical. Emotional PPE. Is that personal protective equipment? I love it. Yeah, absolutely it is. This is internal PPE. This is spiritual PPE is what we're learning about. So basically you're learning that there's things that strengthen your compass, but there's also things that you need to protect your compass. So these elevated thoughts, as mentioned about experience the awareness of who you are. You actually want to dedicate some seated time to do that. And again, this is just a suggestion, is try at the beginning of your day. Even if whatever the time you wake up is, Experiment with that at the beginning of your day, that becomes what your awareness that you are nurturing and cultivating. Because usually what happens is that we jump right into our roles, and there's a lot of roles that aren't who we are at all, and not a reflection of the absolute sense of who we are. And another suggestion, if you're open, is at the earlier times in a day, and it might be pushing it. We're talking about, between 2 to 5 a.m. And way before being in the study, actually, I knew somebody who liked to get up early. And so I wasn't even in the study, and at that time it had nothing to do with being in the study, but I was curious that he liked to wake up so early. And he was just a colleague who just likes to get up early in the morning. So one time I was just inspired to wake up at 5 o'clock, and I was so fascinated of how quiet the atmosphere at that time. And it was just a one-time experiment. I just wanted to see, and it was such a very different feeling. And if that's a part of it, again, about see for yourself, experiment for yourself. What does the feeling in the atmosphere feel like between the hours of 2 to 5 versus 12 o'clock in the afternoon? And if you're ever driving, if you have to get to a destination, there's been times when I'd had to drive at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the atmosphere is very different compared to 12 o'clock in the day. That vibration we can take advantage of in terms of experiencing this lightness of me, the soul. So more things have been shared that can really help and strengthen our compass. Churning virtues strengthens our compass. Stop, check, and change our thoughts. That's a really important one. And that can be something we can pause and do throughout the day. You can always pick a theme as well, and we can, perhaps we'll have to go into that a bit more later. But for example, for me today, the theme really was about being honest with myself. What is really benefiting me? And so when it comes to checking and changing, what I do at every hour is like, is the experience, and this is connected to what Pauline had shared earlier about in terms of when we had asked, what is our spiritual destination? And Pauline had shared about soul consciousness. And so a part of my checking today is, what do I feel there is a benefit in experiencing being soul conscious, in the awareness that I am a soul? Is there benefit? And I note things down. And if I'm not feeling benefit, I even acknowledge that, okay, there must be some interference going on. And so you can definitely cater, your reflection, the focus on your day, using the things we've mentioned about in today's session, so that it helps you to continue to be a very personal form of navigation each day, always honoring that that spiritual destination of peace, of happiness, of harmony. So Jima had shared pure thoughts, pure feelings about self and others, self-respect, feeling in harmony within can strengthen our inner compass. Absolutely. And this is connected to also practicing to feel. That's why I use the word feel and sense that others are souls too. It takes some practice. Why does it take practice? It's because our eyes are now so affected by physicality. This really, for those who are in the West and you've heard of this, don't judge a book by its cover. It's a very well-known saying. You probably have it in different cultures, but it is definitely a saying that we certainly cannot honor. If we would not see the current issues we have seen today, even till today, is that we are so affected by the physical. We just look at someone and already have in our mind what they're like. Someone drives a certain car, and I know that, Pauline, you mentioned what you drive a truck, that we have certain ideas when we see certain things, and we're attached to those things. So practicing even seeing others as souls, feeling, sensing, this is a subtle being of peace. That's what they originally are. That's not what we're like now. Neither am I. But when you practice that, and I've been really practicing that a lot lately, and I've been really feeling like a powerful benefit, because what that does is it purifies your consciousness of your interactions with others. That's the intention of Raj Yoga, is purifying your consciousness of your interactions with others, purifying your awareness and relationship with yourself and actions. This is why your compass is very, very important, because we need our compass to be able to see things properly, to be able to take the right directions that honors who we really are. And so some other things in terms of practicality. So we mentioned about what strengthen things, and aside from the honest questions we ask yourself, taking that time to be able to experience that awareness of being the soul. So we mentioned about mornings, super morning, early morning hours. I would suggest as well as the last thing you do in the day, because again, we're trapped in, our roles, the consciousness of our roles. So the whole point of that is so that I can start to get back into that being that I really, really am. It's kind of like taking off a costume that if you were an actor, you don't wear your costume when you come home. You leave it there on the rack. So we need to be able to, at the end of the day, let go of these temporary roles that we get ourselves in. In terms of another practical piece, in terms of how to strengthen my intellect, is to use it. And we have been talking about using it, but now we're talking about day-to-day practical things. So one example was being able to practice feeling and sensing that others are souls, being very aware of that. Like you'll notice, and that it's going to be challenging when it comes to individuals that you're familiar with. So you can practice first with those you don't know. You can practice afar. I mean, everyone has to go to places, even when you're at home, even if you're watching the television, you're just seeing just people passing by in the television, just practicing, having that awareness that these are all living beings. What are their true nature? What their true nature is like is the kind of qualities I'm looking for myself. So that strengthens my intellect. So another thing I know that I think Zoe had mentioned about honoring myself through the day is practicing to just check in with myself. When things happen, when thoughts come, is that really who I really am? Are those thoughts really who I really am? Or are they things that have accumulated through time? Again, we're talking about these aspects in Raja Yoga that as living beings of souls, we've been through a journey. And so knowledge is such a huge part in terms of sharpening and strengthening my intellect, is because I'm learning to have a lens to see things through. And this is a lens that God sees through as well. It's a lens of truth. And when there is a lens of truth, there is objectivity. And seeing myself and seeing emotions and thoughts, and to be able to see others too, so that I'm learning to not just see things at face value. Because again, that's what that phrase is, don't judge a book by its cover. Everyone can agree with that. But learning to embody that is another question. So what is truth is definitely very invisible. And our inner compass senses the invisible. Right now, we're very used to, accessing things on a very, superficial level in terms of our thoughts. We see something, already creates impression. We see something, thoughts come up, but those things will keep going. But I want to use my compass now to, okay, now all these thoughts are coming up, these emotions, these reactions inside, to be able to start seeing those things with understanding. So that's something that strengthens our intellect, our compass is throughout the day to be able to use it. When these thoughts come up, when choices come up as well. So another thing that I can practically do to strengthen my compass is starting to also be aware of what is appropriate at the right time. And probably some are wondering, what does that mean? It's about, what do I need right now? When we're talking about spiritual destination, it's really challenging when you're, we're basically right now need rehabilitation. We're patients who really need to heal. So if you're in a very challenging situation and trying to expect yourself to honor that, kudos if you can, but if it's a challenge, don't beat yourself up for it. But find more easier situations. Let's say, for example, you gave yourself a lot of time to get to an appointment, right? Be clear while you're in the car. What is my real destination? What is really appropriate? Still, yes, I need to get to that appointment, but my real destination is peace. So right now I can actually be at my destination while I'm actually driving. And what that does too, is you have just even improved your quality of the experience. You have created a pathway of mastering what really matters to you. You want peace, you can get it right now. Because right now we have this consciousness is, I got to do this, I need to pay this, I need to have all these things happen so I can have that. That is now our attitude. It's such a rigid, deep-seated attitude. We are learning actually to master what we've been wanting now. And so that's why we call it Raja Yoga. Raja means mastery. It means self-sovereignty, that I can access that now. So perhaps that as the second piece about and what is needed at the right time might not seem very clear. But another example, a bit more practical, that I've been also using, and I know I give the example about that, is when I get to the workplace, I can start to increasingly sense when I see someone, and again, you're seeing their role, it's like, and you kind of want to ask them about a question you asked them, yesterday, did they get that done or something? And I start to really be like, no, it's not the right time right now. No, it's not the right time, sensing that. And sometimes I see other students, we have ongoing projects. Same thing too. No, it's not the right time now. Or it's early in the morning and I really want to have some meaningful time just to sit in the experience of myself. And lots of other thoughts. No, this is not the right time right now. I'm learning to now start to use my compass about what is needed right now. And even a more deeper aspect in terms of if there's certain emotions you're feeling off, even checking in, what do I really need right now? Because sometimes we do things on an internal level that isn't really helpful. We push, we control, we suppress, we judge ourselves. Just needing to check in, what do I need right now? What would be really helpful for me right now? Maybe certain thoughts might be even just like, okay, I just need to go for a walk. But that can strengthen our inner compass as well. So before we have another little reflection, just want to see if there's any thoughts or questions, comments. And while souls may be typing things, I wanted to just comment a little bit about the impact of experiencing myself. There's different levels of impact, and just reflecting on the awareness of myself has an impact. But going to the experience of myself as this living soul, it brings silence. And this silence, it's like as if your mind and your intellect is like this water. It's like it's in the environment of this water. And if you've ever seen a pond, and if it's placid, if it's calm, it's like a mirror. So you will be able to see things very crystal clear. And that's what happens when you experience yourself to be a soul. When you take some time to have that pure experience, we always invite you to the experience sessions that we have on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays, because that's strengthening that experience of you. Because what happens, that's the pure sense of who you are. And what happens is that when you do that, is that your capacity to feel what's not you will increase. You'll start to even be able to sense when uh, things are starting to affect you, even from the inside out, noise in your mind, and you'll be able to actually check and change more effectively as well. And one of the biggest things that causes sorrow is when we actually make decisions that that don't honor ourselves, and we may not even realize that we're doing that. And it could be the subtle, most tiny, mundane decisions that we're making. So that's why the more we actually have that quiet time to experience, the more you'll be able to have a compass of knowing what is the right thing to do for myself. So Neela has shared check and change, the core of our inner compass. Absolutely, that is why our inner compass is like the most important thing for us. And it's because when we always, and this is a part of when we always look on the outside and we see only things on the superficial. That's why jealousy and anger and name and fame come up. So we're actually dulling our inner compass. We're not sharpening it. And so a part of being able to actually be cautious, I don't mean it um, in a restricting way, but when again there is that disinterest, a tiredness of operating in the old way, you are very keen of how to protect your compass. So be very cognizant as well. What do I expose myself to? Conversations, things in social media, because you can actually protect it. And it's the same thing as when it's something that you care a lot about. For mothers, they would do everything for their children. But things that I value, our compass actually is the most important thing at this time, to be able to gain the original sense of who I am. I know with the essence of, with the time and, this topic, we aren't able to cover about the function that God plays, but that's what we will hope to actually have a Raja Yoga course coming up again very soon. But his function is to help to strengthen, protect, nurture my inner compass so that I can experience myself fully. His function is to help me get myself completely back again. So that is his function. So Pauline has mentioned, how about when it comes to following your instinct or gut doesn't align with truth? That's an excellent question, and it always comes up, and it's a great question because it always comes up with this word intuition. It's a very tricky thing because you could not actually even be aware of your true self and still have preferences. And I know that Jima had mentioned about vices, and this is a bigger topic in terms of Raja Yoga, is that being able to actually know the real me. So there are 7 qualities of the absolute truth of who I am, the soul. So that's peace, love, harmony, bliss, truth, purity, and power. These 7 qualities, that's the original sense of who I am. But through time, when I forget who I am, and we can tell, how do we know? When there's fear, when there's expectations of others for self, disappointment, feeling affected, disturbed, rejecting, avoiding, all of that stuff. Yes, I can type them down. So maybe peace, power, purity, bliss, harmony, love, peace. There you go. I think they're all there. So through time, when we forget who we are, and you may not even be cognizant, if you're having any of these vices, if there's ever any trace of sorrow, if there's ever any trace of disappointment, of any trace of emptiness, expectations for others, those things can always basically affect how you see things. And so being really clear inside, is that, that instinct, is that really based on, pure, a very clear intention inside. And a big sign about that is a few things, is that when there's silence, internal silence inside, when there's silence inside and there's no feelings of like fear, and there's no feelings, but what if something happened, there would be complete trust with whatever unfolds. And I'll give one example because I'm just very mindful of time. So I know that we're running close to the end. But when the pandemic started actually last year, and this date that everyone's quite cognizant of, I think it was like March 10th or March 12th or something like that. I remember that my flight to go to India was on March 12th. And March 10th, 11th was around the time when basically the world acknowledged that a pandemic had started. And my flight was booked and it was going to come up in about less than 12 hours. And that's when India had announced that they were closing their borders to tourists on March 13th. And I would arrive like 12 hours before that. And I had lots and lots of messages coming on my phone. I was still outside just shopping for a few things. And I just felt it in the atmosphere, that something in the atmosphere dropped. I could totally feel it. It was a very weird feeling. And then, minutes later, I'm at the store and all of these texts were coming onto the phone. And, I didn't actually look at them yet. By the time I got back to the house, and I heard this news from one of the other students who was also going to be going at around the same date as I was. And all these, basically everyone was saying, are you going? Or don't go, don't go, don't go. I was getting it from all different directions. And what was really interesting for those who do study Raja Yoga, we have something called traffic control that we practice. And it's basically every hour you pause and you can do a few things. You can go into the experience of being a soul, or you can, as Richard had mentioned about just checking yourself, checking the quality of your thoughts, checking with your compass, where are you at? What have you been, what have you been doing in the last hour? Has it been helpful for you or not? And every time I was going into that experience of myself as a soul, every time that evening as the day rolled on, the feeling was very clear of what I wanted, what felt right. But I didn't share that with anyone. I just kept telling everyone, yeah, we'll see. I really wanted to have a very clear decision that was coming from the right place. And so I basically waited until early morning during that silence time, what we call Amrit Vela. Again, the whole point during that time is to experience myself to be a soul and be in that silence with the Supreme Soul, my spiritual parent. And the feeling at that time, it wasn't just about yes or no. It was this feeling of complete trust. And I felt completely full and content that I knew what decision I had to make. And the reason why it was so important to me was because I didn't want to make a decision because of others. I didn't want a decision where I would have to regret as well. And I didn't want a decision where I would feel like I was jealous because, so many others got a chance to go because there were many who was going at the same time. And that to me set such a high bar in terms of being able to be very clear of what is a decision that is instinct and gut. Yes, it can definitely be based on truth. However, your internal environment has to be very clean. It has to be very still inside. And so Pauline had mentioned, it doesn't drain your energy or compromise you. Absolutely, completely. And that's why that experience was such a learning experience for me, because the choice I made, I was completely free, completely free. And there was no desire of what the outcome was whatsoever. And this is what it means actually. And there's something bigger than this about the law of karma, is that there is spiritual laws in place. And it's about what's driving my decisions, that where our compass is really important, because we can do things, and there could be subtle desires, but it's what my agenda is. It doesn't necessarily mean it's actually beneficial for others. So that's why truth is actually quite invisible as well. The impact, benefit for others, myself, in terms of being able to support the absolute truth of everyone. That's what this whole entire, this study to do is to really foster everyone's absolute sense of who they really are. So I know that great question. If you have other questions, let us know. Well, I know we're running, so we'll just have a little bit of a pause for a reflection. So just checking in again with myself, that honest question. What would really, truly fulfill me? What do I really, really want? Is it things? Is it for people to be a certain way in situations? Is it a certain feeling or feelings that I really want? Being really honest with that answer and using that honest question through the day so that I don't get pulled into the routines, the roles. Being clear about what matters to me supports a love to want to go into the experience and awareness of who I really am. And just checking in as well, do I feel that I am just these roles that change the day? Or am I much more a living being, seeing through these eyes, a living eternal being? That nothing of physicality defines me. Do I feel that to be much more fulfilling? Maybe I can't hold that much in a day, but foster that at least at dedicated times in the day. Shanti. So just a few minutes just to share your personal blessing. And we certainly want to be able to share a blessing for those as well who would be watching this online on YouTube. So this is a blessing for those who are watching online. Thank you for joining. This is for YouTube. You are a soul who sees fortune in solitude, where an ocean of understanding and rich value can be found because it is the very depth of who you are. And so for Pauline, thank you so much for joining. Excellent questions and beautiful thoughts and insights you have to share. You are a soul whose heart was so unlimited at the beginning of your spiritual journey, where your profound state of self-respect also served to heal the world. It is time to return back to the beginning. So thank you again, Pauline. And we hope that this would be useful for you on a practical level. So Nilu, thank you again for coming as well. Beautiful thoughts you have to share as well. You are a being whose love for truth makes self-forgiveness possible and world benefit inevitable. Forgiveness is such a huge one. Is that when there's realization inside of whatever it is, truth of when I'm not true to myself or when I am, there can be self-forgiveness. So very, very powerful. Thank you, Nilu, for joining. And Richard, thank you for coming. Lovely for your sharings as well. You are a soul who sees fortune in solitude, where an ocean of understanding and rich value can be found because it is the very depth of who you are. Thank you, Richard, for coming. And so, Sheila, thank you again for joining as well and for your sharings. Much appreciated. It's beneficial for everyone. So your blessing, you are a courageous soul who learns to let go of the past with an understanding that heals and a maturity that empowers. So thank you so much, Sheila, for joining. Just want to let you all know, if you can see that it says time in the background of the compass, and that's why we chose this, because time, doing things according to the need for yourself. Naturally, you'll be able to do that for others, but first for myself. So thank you, Sheila. Zoe, thank you for your thoughts. It's good to see you again. This is a blessing for you. You are a soul who sees fortune in solitude, where an ocean of understanding and rich value can be found because it is the very depth of who you are. I feel like that was a repeat, wasn't that? So was that? If that was, let me pick another blessing for you, Zoe. You are a one-of-a-kind being who loves the depth of truth because of the depth of spiritual strength that awaits your discovery. So thank you, Zoe, for joining. And we have Jima, who is also here taking benefit, but also our IT. So thank you, Jima, for joining, and your thoughts are much appreciated as well. You ignite the light of humility in the world, where your authenticity inspires others to discover their own uniqueness and self-respect. And so you can also take benefit from all the blessings. All the blessings can be yours as well. And so thank you so much for coming. And we really appreciate that, everything that you have shared as well. And so we will have this on YouTube as well. If you have anything that you wanted to go over, if you have questions, feel free to let us know as well through email. The most important thing about these things is about practical. How do I make this practical, very relevant for myself? And so again, thank you again for joining. And we will see you next time. Take care. Om Shanti.